Fáilte war roimh he géal an figil dúir na mna agriach pobl agus oige an ascin achlánaí na Gaeilge le ach ginoint pobl. Táid an seo aniu chun calorí anna ar lá idirnáisiún den naán agus ar seaachtain na Gaeilge le beirt fan Spragal agus Cinráideach Rosie McCorley agus Rosaleen Walsh le Léiriú scannáin de car TG4 Mná and IRA. So I'd just like to welcome you all here to Gillan and Fagil and Lord Mona, the community and youth organisation that connects language available to community regeneration. We are here today to celebrate International Women's Day and Shafton na Gaeilge with two inspirational and pioneering women, Rosie McCorley and Rosaleen Walsh, with the film showing of TG4's Women of the IRA. But firstly, I'd just like to take the opportunity to say that today's event and celebration of International Women's Day is dedicated to Rita O'Hare, who was an inspiration to us all as a Republican, community and feminist activist. So girl, Mila Mayoka, Rita O'Hare. So it's really going to be really informal. We're going to show, first of all, is it Rosie McCorley's video? So we're going to show Rosie McCorley's video, which is going to be 25 minutes, and then we're going to show Rosaleen's video, which is another 25 minutes. And then we'll just have a discussion, so you can just ask whatever questions. But firstly, I'd just like to introduce Rosie McCorley. And the video is basically introduce himself, this is just a short bio. So, born in Belfast in 1957, Rosie McCorley left school at 17 to work in the housing executive, where she worked until the time of her arrest in 1990, when she was sentenced to 66 years. She obtained 2 degrees and a postgraduate diploma while in prison. Rosie McCorley was elected to the Northern Ireland Assembly as a member of Sinn Féin between 2012 and 2016. And we have Rosaleen Walsh, was born in 1950 in Belfast, and she joined Cumann na mBan as a young woman. She was interned in Armagh prison in 1973 for just over a year. Here, her writing flourished and she covered her white cell walls with poetry. Walsh was actively involved with Sinn Féin in the lead up to the peace process. She has written 35 plays, 33 of which have been produced. So my chef. And these have really helped shape better lives for us. You know, we're sitting here in Mona, the community organisation, a youth organisation, where hundreds of kids come in each night, hundreds of young women come in and are politically educated, and it's because of hard work and sacrifice of people like you, so Gura Mila Mayoka. So I just thought I'd start by asking, what does International Women's Day mean to you?
Well, it's a recognition of the special place that women do have in the world. Without women there would be no world, because women give birth, but also women have been neglected in every society throughout the world. And I don't know who thought up Women's International Day, but I think it really shone the spotlight on the lives of women. I don't think any woman has really had an easy life.
Yeah.
And I think it's good that that be recognised.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really important because we've come a long way, but I mean, you're still in a situation where the gulf between how women are treated and how men are envisaged in society, it's still huge.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes even in your own mind, you find yourself realising that you still carry something where you feel you're different, and it's because it's got ingrained in you from a very young age, and you have to actively make yourself maintain awareness of the reality that everyone is equal, everyone should be equal, but it's not the case, and you see it all the time. It's always in the media. I mean, I think it's insidious the way some young people grow up with that feeling, and that boys are better than girls. You know, it starts off in schools, it still happens. And you know, all the social media stuff that's still going on, most of it's directed at women. You hear about women politicians getting a really hard time. So it's about how do you, what can you do to try and help change that. And you can only do what you can do and influence people around you. But days like International Women's Day at least are really good for bringing it to the fore and maintaining the awareness. But there is a massive job of work, like, still.
Definitely. And just you saying that, you know, it was always something that was kind of ingrained in you. It was always something that's there. This male-dominated presence. At what point do you think that you started to actually become aware of that? And do you think that that was related to your Republican politics? Do you think that was related to the Republican struggle? Did that help expose them issues?
Yeah, I suppose just growing up, just awareness just started to develop, you know, within me and people around me. Prison really was a catalyst because it gave you the opportunity to be with a group of women who would have been of a similar vein to yourself and become politically aware, and being able to have that interaction and having the time actually to have the interaction, because life's busy and people don't always get the chance to do that. So prison actually afforded you, you know, opportunities like that. So that was, I mean, that was a big catalyst for my own thinking, and I know the people around me in prison at the same time for our thinking to develop. So, but it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just that in them trying to oppress you, they actually liberated some part of your brain.
Well, they do, and the thing too about it was while we were in prison, it was around International Women's Day that strip search happened when they came in and they searched everybody in the prison. And you know, there was an uproar about it at the time, and one of the reasons, they gave 3 reasons, you know, they tried to cover up their tracks as to why they did it, but one of the reasons was that we had provoked the prison authorities to do it because we wanted it to happen around International Women's Day, and you know, that was the craziness of the way, you know.
So they were just as certain that was them strip searches were gender specific by even saying.
Oh, absolutely. You know, men would have been strip searched in a different way from women.
Yeah.
Women's bodies were used against them in prison.
And were you aware of that at the time? Did you feel that, like, as a woman?
Yeah, you actually, like, well, some women actually spoke about feeling, having been, we all felt violated, but some akin to rape.
That's so traumatic.
Yeah.
And like, just even thinking about that on a larger scale, like, that's carried on for generations too, that trauma. The trauma that our community suffered because of that. Yeah. It's crazy. So we just going back to your political activism, was there one point in time that you remember that really politicised you to actually become active? Now I know you both kind of had, like, as you came from like Republican families or whatever, you may have had a bit of like historical awareness of what was going on, but was there one moment in time that actually that made you get involved or made you become active?
I think when you realise it didn't start as political at first, it's when you see the social injustice, and as you say about the difference between women and men. In our house, the boys always got more dinner than the girls. Now that sounds like just a small thing, but it's not really. Why would the young boys get more than the girls? Because the mothers indoctrinated into believing that it just goes on and on and on, that boys have this entitlement, and also women never had the vote. But of course we didn't know until we became politically aware that women didn't have a vote until after the suffragettes, and in different countries, some countries now they still don't have a vote. I think in, I can't remember the name of it, I wrote a poem about it. You can only vote if you're voting for a man, and begins with a B, your woman, and Sang Suu. She was under house arrest in Burma. It's only recently women there had a vote, but I think it was something that men, in order to keep women down, from the beginning of time, the attitude towards women in small ways, and then the next thing, women are of the same mind, and they don't realise that they were brainwashed into believing that there is no equality. Men are better than women, boys are better than girls.
And do you think, like, being involved in the Republican movement, like, exposed that more?
Well, I remember being interviewed in the 70s, and the American who's interviewing me said about feminism and abortion, and I said at the time, yeah, maybe some people do, are working on that, but at that time, women in the north of Ireland, maybe not in the south, but in the north, we had too many other things, to contend with, and, that was something you had at the back of your mind, we can do that later.
Yeah.
But then as time went on, it balanced out. I don't think there was a moment as such.
Yeah. I suppose I think of the phrase ní saoirse position and all, and that became apparent, but that was like after some decades. That wasn't in the 70s, but it was realised that there wouldn't be real true freedom until women had freedom, and that's something that has been recognised. The other thing too, just when you were talking about prior to the outbreak of the Troubles and what led up to it, the injustices that Rosaleen was talking about, and it was students who were part of the civil rights campaign leading the way there, and women were very much central to that, but at that time they didn't see any contradiction in calling for one man, one vote. And so all these things were realised later, but it was probably because of how it was, and they didn't think there was anything wrong with that. But gradually the awareness grows and you become aware of it. In my own case, I would have been, before the Troubles broke out, grown up in the 60s, you knew the stories about, about struggles for Irish freedom over the centuries and all the things that had happened in, 1916, and just had that burning feeling inside you that, you would love to see that, you'd love to see Ireland's freedom and all of that, and that would have been there, that would have been inside me. And then whenever the conflict began, and it was like turmoil really at the time, and then it developed then into the armed struggle, and I was young then, suppose. I was born in 57, and in 1970 I was 13, but I wanted to join the movement, but I didn't know how, I didn't know what do you do or who do you talk to, because some people think, if you live in Andersonstown, because I didn't know what to do or where to go. And then it was after Bloody Sunday, people were joining the movement and drugs, and that's whenever me and a number of my friends all became involved. And as I was saying earlier on in the film, there was a big crowd, there was hordes of people who used to stand up at Comeda Hill, near your house, and but then a lot of those people fell away. People just then gradually just maybe faded away if it wasn't for them, and then other people stayed. So that would have been probably the moment they got my chance, not the moment that it occurred to me that I wanted to be involved.
So it was just a gradual process.
Yeah.
And another way you can look at things about the inequality, when they didn't start to intern women at the same time as men. They didn't want to intern women for the simple reason there would have been too big an outcry. They would prefer to charge women. So even the British had this sense of, and also the IRA would have been at that time reluctant to shoot an RUC woman.
Yeah.
You know, so there were people, there was a built-in thing about the inequality, you know, women need looked after,
Yeah.
that society had.
Yeah. Even if you look at the panel invasion, the beginning of the 70s, like women were able to march down the street. That had been in the late 70s, you were to get lifted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we were back in the boat.
And also, you look at the curfew being broke, it was the women, but that was for a reason. If men had been there, they just would have welted into it, you know. And it was sort of, I'm not saying a respect, but there was sort of, they took a step back. I think society all over the world had this thing about women. And sometimes it was good, men opened doors, and then when men stopped opening doors, and if you were on a bus, a man would have got up and give a woman a seat, but then it stopped, you know, and so women had to take the equality, you know, you weren't going to, even 7 months pregnant, nobody's going to get up and give you, you know, a seat. It sort of swings the other way in different ways.
Yeah. And Roseleen, you found a lovely way to portray your feelings and share your emotions and your views through poetry and the arts and your playwrights. Do you want to just give it, I know you actually brought some poems with you.
Yes.
If
just
you want to give a wee context to them and maybe share one.
And this one, they only did part of it at the end of the end of the documentary. I actually wrote this for my brother. He was in, I like taking photos, you know, if I'm doing a particular poem. He was sentenced to life, and then the peace process came, and it's called The Tunnel. I wrote this just after the peace process. We got a visit up to the tunnel. Some have argued that there was choice, but after the first thought of the injustice, after the first stone thrown, there was no going back. Now 40 years later, I have survived, reached manhood, unlike many I know, and I stand at the entrance to the tunnel that sent thousands to an unkind, unforgiving place. I stand where too many stood, but now I have choice. I can go home, I can live in peace, because I am part of the peace. I'd like to read this one. It's really about the yard in Armagh prison when we used to parade on it. It's called The Internees. We were all like young saplings, except for Madge. Years had given her wisdom, like the oak trees that we sang to in the park and carved our initials deep into their bark, never knowing how much a tree might hurt, nor did we care at the time, for nothing mattered then that we could not rhyme. As we stood to attention in line, saluting our fallen dead, words from the proclamation would always proudly be read. Though the prison yard was small, it was large enough for us to play, parade and pray, and breathe fresh air for a limited time each day. They took our time and caged us in with only cement and wire. They thought that imprisonment would dampen freedom's fire, but death nor prison were not enough to shatter freedom's dream, for we were growing oaks, standing side by side, now almost 50 years but 3. I think of each of us a tree. I hope they think the same of me. Liz McKee, Teresa Holland, Anne Walsh, Angela Nelson, Marie Delaney, Colette Mulvena, Marion Friel, Anne Doherty, Brenda Casson, Margaret Shannon, Kate White, Bridge McPhillips, Lillian Kelly, Anne-Marie McWilliams, Evelyn Gilroy, Mary Kennedy, Geraldine O'Neill, Geraldine McCann, Julia Traynor, Maya Hennessy, Kate Finnegan, Margaret Barr, Annette Kennedy, Roisin O'Reilly, Deirdre Flynn, Mary Robinson, Maria Tigard, Madge McConville, Jerry McCanavan, Claire Delaney, Geraldine Taylor, Jean Delaney, Nuala Tully, Eileen Delaney and Rosaleen Watson, me. I have one about Maria Farrell if you want to.
Yep.
It's just about standing at the White Line pickets. A way of remembering Gibraltar. The freezing rain pelted down. I faced the oncoming traffic without blinking as headlights blinded and horns hooted in support of our line, our attempt to jolt memories, our attempt to say, remember. The freezing rain pelted down, and I could not have been colder if I had been shot dead, with my hands held above my head in Gibraltar. But here in Belfast, on this apocalyptic night, my hands held the poster across my heart to hold tight the dream they dreamed. The rain got colder and thicker, and our White Line picket grew longer and stronger. No one moved or fell out until the end. Soaked to the skin, we hurried home to talk, some to pray, but all to remember. 25 years ago that day, Gibraltar.
I think that was really, really special, and it just goes to show.
I should have said 35. I wrote it 10 years ago, but it was 35
Yesterday.
Today, I think, or tomorrow. Yesterday,
It was really, really special. Thank you. And sharing all them stories and memories of the women that inspired you too.
Well, it was great to be invited, and it was great that yourself and the organisers had the insight. I mean, those documentaries were done years ago.
Yeah.
It was great you had the insight to connect this time, Women's International Day, with that, and to invite us and to give us the freedom to talk about our lives.
Will we open it up to the floor? Is that okay? Does anyone anyone have any questions? Or anything they would like to say?
Just what you were saying there, Rosaleen, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for yous, as Emer said at the start, like, so it came from yous, the fact that we are here tonight.
I suppose the way Bobby Sands said, everybody has a part to play, and it's like a jigsaw. We're part of it, and yous are, you know, it's a jigsaw that can never be completed because you keep adding bits and you keep getting a bigger picture and you keep seeing different things in what you've already done. And
Yeah, well,
but it's great to connect.
no, it is good to know that you know, young people like yourselves are interested and want to know and ask questions about you know what happened and about what our lives were like. So if we can help anybody just by even sharing those memories, then it's probably no bad thing at all.
Yeah. So, Marty?
Rosie, would you explain how you feel about the connection between the Irish language movement today, going back to the Republican movement that you came up in? Is there a very clear lineage there to the Dramjaric movement, for instance, that comes right through?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're both, if you think about it, it's about struggle. I mean, the Irish language movement has been one of struggle, and it still goes on. I mean, I suppose getting the legislation recently has been a realisation of what people have been, you know, fighting for and struggling for really for years gone by. So, I mean, the movement, the Republican movement, I see the connections between, you know, the Irish language and the Republican movement, because to me it's a bit like a jigsaw. It's all part of our culture. It's part of our history. It's part, you know, if you think about the history of struggle and what was done on the Irish nation, trying to kill the Irish language was a very specific action that was taken, and it almost died out only for people who took up the mantle and have kind of continued on that struggle. And then for people like yourselves and people like in the Dramjaric and all the different Irish language organisations over the years who have kept that going against the odds, because it's been difficult. And I suppose there were times whenever nothing seemed to be happening, you'd be struggling all the time, but not seeming maybe to get very far. But now you can see the fruits of the labours that people have put into it, and it's great to see. So to me, it's all linked with the struggle, you know, the Republican struggle. I see it as all as one thing.
Also, just given that benefit of being able to have a retrospective, out of those sort of dark days when you were stuck in Armagh or wherever it was, are you surprised at the popularity that it has with sort of today's generation? It's a whole subculture that's very, like, I mean, I'm born in the 80s, but I would never, publicly even bring a flag into the city centre. You get surprised at how the bravado that young people have about republicanism at the minute.
But I think it's brilliant the way people just are proud and loud about their political views and their republicanism and their views about other issues, you know, which aren't strictly Republican, they're just social issues. And I think that's really important, because growing up as we did, you kept your head down, you were quiet. The generation before us, like my parents and like Rosaleen's parents, they would have been, their heads would have been lower again. Because you used to wonder sometimes, why did you just put up with that? But it was the times that were in it.
Well, I remember in the 60s, we'd friends from Dublin used to come up. We used to go down to Dublin, my sister and myself. We went down to Dublin and they brought us here, they brought us there, they brought us everywhere. They came up to us and we suddenly realised the only place we could bring them to was chapels. In the 60s, we didn't have a city hall. We were never in the city hall. We had no ownership of anything. And I used to think, they might bring us to all these historic places. There's nowhere in Belfast, there's only chapels. And that's the way it was. We had nothing, we had no identity. We didn't belong because we weren't considered part of the establishment here. It's only since the Troubles, and specifically since Sinn Féin took their stand in the City Hall, that we had ownership of the City Hall. Every community has a City Hall, but we were never in the city. We didn't identify with it, and we didn't know, as kids and young teenagers, we didn't know why. We couldn't articulate it. Just that all these other people have all these places, but chapels were the only place we could bring people. And it's all changed now. And that probably is hard to believe, because when I started work, I was born in 1950, when I started work in 65, coming up to the 12th of July, all Protestants stopped speaking to Catholics. Now, it's hard to take in. When I told that to my children, they wouldn't believe me. They would say, but why did they stop speaking to you? And I would say, because coming up to the 12th of July. But what did you say to them? You didn't say anything, because nobody else. You were a 15-year-old. You didn't know what the score was, and you just did what other people did. And that is the way it was. And it's so ridiculous. After the 12th of July, they all started speaking to you again as if nothing had happened. And that's the way.
That is how it was. And my sister worked in a stitching factory, and other people worked out in Grundy. Used to be out just beyond Shirtstown Road. And coming up to the 12th, they put Union Jacks on their machines. And then all that, they're not talking to people.
It is hard to believe.
And there was just then a culture among our people of not challenging that.
Yes,
you sort of kept your head down, and it was like allowing those other civic places in the city, like the City Hall and all that there, and even the actual city itself. That's not really ours, and we kind of took it as a protest. We don't go there because that's not ours, and we don't see it as ours. And I thought it was brilliant whenever Republicans then turned that around and started marching right into the city centre, and you know, taking ownership of places like the City Hall and all the other places. Like, I mean, where else? Why else would you allow them not to let you go there? And whenever you know, Sinn Féin was then going beacon into places like Stormont, there were a lot of people going, oh no, but you wouldn't go, because that was like the black institution. It was like you really couldn't go there. But then you just turned that around. Well, why wouldn't you? Do you know? Because it's as much ours as it is anybody else's. So it's all about mindset too. So mindsets changed, and then people then got the courage and just challenged everything. And that's what's happening now. People just challenge things now, and it's brilliant.
When I was 15, that was a time where you could walk in and out of shops or factories and ask, have you any vacancies? And the weapon always used, which you didn't tipple to at first, was what school did you go to? And as soon as you said, they used to go like that, you know. The thing was, if we were black, you know, they just wouldn't even have looked at us, but they had to find out what school we went to before they could dismiss us. And that's the way we were treated. And we did accept being treated like that until the Troubles, and everything changed, attitudes changed, but up until the Troubles, we really were second-class citizens, and we fitted into it nicely.
We did, yeah.
Can I just say something there? That was very, very well put, and I'm a 70-year-old woman, and I'm only realising what you said there was the way it was, and the analysis of saying that we didn't have anything like a city hall or anything, that we only had chapels, that never dawned on me till right now when you're saying that, and that is so vivid, so vivid. They had everybody was. If you were of the other persuasion, you had all sorts of things to go. You had city halls, you had the botanic gardens, all those things, but we didn't. And that really came across very, very well. And you didn't realise that you were missing this. You didn't even think you were missing this. You didn't realise you were being, deceived of these things. That was very, very well put, I must say, because I remember, not being able to go there, not being able to go here because of who it was. And I didn't go to chapels too much. But, that was very, very well. That described our life, at the time. And on top of that, we also had the women's thing as well, of being second-class citizens, very much so.
A woman had to be churched after a baby before she was allowed out or back into a church.
And my granda always said, Protestant Parliament for Protestant people. And you see what I say, it's just so different from what it was like I was growing up. As you say, Rosaleen, loads of places you weren't accepted. All you had to say was your school.
Mm-hmm. That's it, that was the obvious. That was your blackness, what school you went to. And that was the weapon, the discreet weapon.
Any more questions?
If there's not another question, just two hard ones of mine, one that I knew, one that I didn't, but I adored her memory and everything about her. If you have any wee nuggets about either Mairead or Reid O'Hare, if you happen to know either of them, just seeing as we're on two sort of anniversaries, if you have anything you could share with us.
Well, I have one thing, and I'll share it freely because I have it in a play, and I'm also writing a book, so I have it in that. The night Laura Crawford died, Laura was from Léiriú, and there was myself and another two girls in our kitchen. The battalion OC of the 1st Battalion came in, and he asked did I know who the Common Among volunteer was who was out on an operation earlier. And I said I did, and he said, can you go and find out? I asked why, and he said there was a premature explosion. A member of Odlina Heron was blown up, and a member of Common Among. They knew who the army fellow was Basil Fox. And so anyway, we went round different houses trying to find who the girl was. He just knew she was from the 1st Battalion. Went to several houses, and it wasn't the girls we thought it might have been. So the last house we went to, the girl's mummy said she's round in Mairead's, and so we went round to Mairead Farrell's, and Mairead and the girl opened the door, and it was great because it wasn't her who was dead. And Mairead and the girl walked us down Mairead's driveway to the enclave, and our car screeched up, and the battalion OC jumped out, and also Sean McDermott. And the battalion OC came over and told us it was Laura Crawford, and we were all stunned and numb. But we didn't know at the time. Mairead was there, and Sean McDermott, and 5 months and 5 days later, Sean McDermott would be with Mairead. Sean would be shot dead, and Mairead would be arrested and sentenced to 10 years in prison. And it was one of those times you look back and it was so surreal, it was unreal. And the connection. And also in jail, we were at Mass and Geraldine Crawford, Laura's sister, had been shot dead. Laura's sister, Geraldine, had been shot and she was on crutches. She came into the chapel and they were playing Near My God to Thee. And they played it at Laura's Requiem Mass, and then they also played it at Mairead's Requiem Mass the night before she was brought home from Gibraltar in the same chapel. And the whole circle of events seemed, it was just, looking back, unbelievable. You know, how everything seemed to have been linked.
I didn't know Rita O'Hare, and I knew Mairead, but I wasn't in Armagh, so I wouldn't have been, in jail at that time, so I don't know much about it. It was just really then we would have been knocking about in similar circles, so I don't have anything specific except she was just ordinary. She was really just ordinary like everybody, and good crack, fun loving, and she was just an ordinary girl. It was extraordinary, obviously at the end of the day, but my memory of her is that she was just ordinary.
Thank you.
Can I just ask how you kept your spirits up in jail? Okay, then just had to get the time in, really?
Well, and I don't remember. I mean, whenever I first went into jail, I was in probably, I think, a state of shock without realising it, because I think it's just a shock to your system, finding yourself, whipped out of the world that you live in. And then
I thought that was a joke.
I didn't believe it. So, I mean, it was something you had to get used to, and it takes you a good while to actually get used to it. But what I found was that you just adapted into life in there, and it was a life. There were things just that happened, and you did, the same things, and you get on with, your activities. One of the important things was to do stuff that was useful and productive. So your time wasn't wasted. And do things that you enjoy doing. So, I mean, while it wasn't a life that you'd had outside, it was a life nonetheless. So, it was similar in that way. You just try to get on the best you can. And I didn't find it difficult to keep my spirits up. But I was just same as everybody else. We just kind of got on with it and had good crack. In fact, probably some of the best times of my life were in jail. Best friends I made were people in jail. So, in fact, yesterday I met up with a girl from Tyrone who I was in jail with, and we'd meet up every couple of months. So you always maintain those contacts.
Do you think women would be better at that than the men would be? Keeping up those friendships?
No, actually, I think the men would be the same. You see the way men are very, very strongly bonded to people who are in prison with. You actually see it, and it's the same with women. There's just something about, I think, the closeness of the life that you have with people in prison, because you can't get away from them, so you're stuck with people, and so you get to know every way and turn of them. But because of the things that you go through, just there's a sort of a bond develops. It's different from a bond that you have with people, outside. Mm-hmm.
Well, when Rosaleen was in, it was hard times. When I was in, we had political status, and it was fairly, once you got into the routine, but it was different, in your time,
I would
all
have
the
said
hardships and the strip searches and the dread even of that.
Yeah, I think the 80s were the hardest time, and I didn't go into jail in the 90s, so I think the biggest, all of the protest years were carried on during the 80s, the early 80s, and the strip searches and all that. So whenever time I went in, there was that one mass strip search, but strip search per se, the way it used to happen, that had been kind of stopped to a degree. So I would say that the battles had been won by the time I was in jail, and it was good then that people were able to enjoy maybe a better style of prison life because of what the struggles that other people had carried on, trying to bring about better conditions.
Just if there's no more questions, just maybe finish by just telling us, are you hopeful for the future of